We'd like to welcome everybody to the Zantra Den's variety selection site for 2020 here at High Chimneys Farm. We'd like to start by saying a very special thank you to our hosts here, Elizabeth and John Haffenden, for their kind support and help throughout the year. It's a shame that the current situation is as it is because we can't offer the hospitality and the walk round that we would normally have here on the site, but hopefully this video will go some way to making up for that.
As Chris mentioned, we're lucky to have our regular hosts, the Haffendens, looking after us again this year. This is the 4th year we've been on this farm, so very fortunate that we can then rotate to individual first wheat situations on what is a fairly consistent soil type of brick earth, which gives us that opportunity for very good establishments and good quality trials. The Haffendens are also seed growers for us, and this year they're growing KWS Zayat, Ixtaze and Costello as wheats, as well as spring cropping. The surrounding crop that we have here is KWS Ixtaze to produce C2 for our own production, our retail market here in Kent and the southeast. As far as our market shares by variety in this part of the world, historically we've been quite heavy in terms of groups 1, 2 and 3 and relatively small amounts of group 4, all really to do with our proximity to the London market for human consumption, as well as export opportunities for wheat, oilseed, rape and malting barley. But specifically in terms of wheat, it is that group 1 high grade and low grade protein plus the group 3s that have really dominated our markets. So in this part of the world we are approximately 62 to 63% group 1s and 2s combined, with the dominance of that in the group 1 sector. We then move into group 3s that for us are around about a quarter of what we do, so that's bringing us up to a total of just under 90%, and then a modest amount, around about 10% of group 4 varieties in that mix. So compared to the national picture where you'd see somewhere between 55 and 60% group 4s and then the rest of the area spread out amongst the quality varieties, you can see how different we are in this geographical corner compared to the national picture.
On site there are 12 varieties split into groups 1, 2, 3 and 4. They are laid out in 12 by 2.5 metres on a small plot basis. Each variety block is divided into 6 different fungicide programmes and an untreated plot, which has been replicated across each variety. The site has been sprayed using a small plot knapsack sprayer, and they will be harvested using a small plot combine.
They were established on the 4th of October and all varieties were planted at 325 seeds square metre. So that gave us what we felt was a very robust seed rate at the time. Be no surprise to any of you, having seen the winter conditions, that the crops are markedly thinner than we would normally expect, but all said and done, good even establishment across all varieties, so very pleased to have a credible set of trials.
From an agronomic point of view out here, autumn 2019 was the first autumn for a good number of years when we were trying to grow cereals without the use of deter as a seed treatment against aphids and the transmission of barley yellow dwarf virus. Owing to the weather conditions, aphid levels weren't quite as high as had been feared, and on top of that, a number of crops that were successfully drilled were treated at least once and possibly twice with a pyrethroid insecticide. However, there are significant levels of mild BYDV symptoms showing up on the flag leaves and upper leaves of all varieties on the trial site, and fairly widely on farm, certainly across the southeast of England and up into the Midlands. We believe that this is due to late transmission of virus well into the spring, as it can also be seen on later drilled winter wheats and also in some of the spring cereal crops. Whilst this year it hasn't been a problem, it is a reminder that we do need to be careful in the future and be ready to treat as and when conditions require. We've mentioned the spread of varieties that we have and also the fact that we've got half a dozen different fungicide programs. What we are looking at in particular, bearing in mind that chlorothalonil bit the dust a few weeks ago, poxyconazole is going to do the same during next season. are replacements for those two very important materials. So built into the programs are treatments to help isolate what they were doing and how we can best replace them. To that extent, we have the new BSF fungicide based on Revysol, and the new Corteva fungicide based on Inatrek. Around the site and within the treatments, we haven't included chlorothalonil at all this year, but have concentrated instead on both mancozeb, particularly at the T0 and the T3 timing, and Folpet at the T1 timing. In addition to that, because some of these varieties, as Andrew will explain and we'll pick up on as we go through the plots, have relatively good disease resistances, particularly against septoria, we've looked at a treatment without a T0 input, feeling that perhaps some varieties may well not respond to T0s, and there are comments to that sort of extent within the press. Having said that, one of the cleaner varieties out here last year was KWSX Stays, and in at least a couple of our trials last year, that showed the biggest single response to a T0 treatment. So not everything is as cut and dried as we might believe it to be. On top of that, bearing in mind the move to newer types of chemistry, we've also included a bioelicitor fungicide that goes under the active ingredient name of laminarin, that may seem like muck and mystery, but did in fact give us some very interesting results in several trials that we did last year.
One thing that we did do last year, and again through Chris's explanation of the program that we're using this year, is to really try and identify the regional differences in practice of what fungicide tolerances or fungicide resistances are amongst the varieties, and how that varies to the official data that we see on the recommended lists, and giving growers a bit of forewarning really as to how on that regional basis we should adapt our fungicide programs and timings to account for that regional variability. So again, as we talk through the plot, we'll be making reference to what we learnt last year and any differences that we may have seen this season, to give growers some sort of indication when selecting varieties for this coming autumn what sort of criteria they should be using, rather than just looking at official data, which regionally is bound to be less relevant than local data. It's a matter of having as much information as you possibly can to make a rounded decision.